Welcome to PACKOLUTION. In this podcast series, you'll hear the experts of the packaging industry talking about sustainability and the future of packaging. It is brought to you by Watron and hosted by one of its founders, Michaela Wachtel, and Sales Director Ton Kniepscher.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of PACKOLUTION, the disruptive podcast brought to you by Watron. Today we have Dr. Thomas Gröner, Director and Founder of TG Packsolutions, as our guest, with whom we will be talking about fit-for-purpose packaging and the future of packaging in itself. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, Michaela. Hi, Ton. Thanks for inviting me to the podcast. So far, I have listened to all episodes published. They are really good, great format, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you.
Maybe for the start, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your career path in the packaging sector?
Yeah, with pleasure. I founded the consulting company TG Packsolutions a year ago after more than 30 years industry experience along the packaging value chain. Before that start of my own business, I was for 3 years director of R&D and sustainability at RKW. RKW is a global plastic film producer in the field of hygiene film, agricultural film and packaging. Was responsible for the global R&D and sustainability activities. Before that, I worked 4 years with Mondi, the well-known paper and packaging company. I was head of innovation and R&D for the global flexible packaging business, including the R&D center in Gronau, Germany. And before that, so to say, I worked on the other side of the counter. I worked 24 years in the food industry with companies like Nestle or PepsiCo. I had always European roles in packaging R&D with a big focus on pet food. Yeah, now I'm an independent consultant focusing on sustainability and innovation in the packaging value chain, and I'm enjoying it very much.
It seems like you have an extensive knowledge about monomaterial solutions and material compositions. Therefore, you certainly know a lot about the hurdles that come with these materials, seal integrity, for example. Could you elaborate a bit on those, please?
Yeah, there is a big need for monomaterials currently, and the need comes from the need for a circular plastic economy. Basically, we need to stop drilling a hole in the ground to get oil out, make plastic out of it, use it, shuffle another hole in the ground to drop the plastic there or burn it. We need a circular plastic economy. That means we need design for recycling, and here comes monomaterial. We need right disposal with education. We need collection, sorting, recycling, and the use of recycled material. The current PET, PE, or OPP, PE laminates, they have been optimized on cost and machinability, including sealing performance over decades. Now we have new solutions with MDO, PE combined with PE or PP, PP laminates, which do have a smaller operating window.
Correct.
PET has a high temperature resistance. A PET, PE laminate is easy to seal, we know that. But now the new materials, MDO, PE, PE laminates, for example, has a much smaller sealing temperature differential, even if we have inside a special low temperature sealed PE. In particular, we need to look at the 2-layer, 4-layer area in the seal. So what we need are optimal sealing tools.
And this is where we could come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For food packaging, seal integrity is an absolute must. Otherwise, we get food spoilage that creates waste and a loss of reputation for the food company and the supermarket. Seal integrity is as well very important when it comes to liquid packaging. We don't want to have leaking of liquids out of flexible packaging. Or seal integrity is important as well in the area of insect tightness for dry food and pet food. To get there, we need a collaborative work on the system. The system needs optimization, the whole system. From the converter, from the food manufacturer, which is operating the filling lines, machine supplier, sealing tool supplier all together. That way we can monomaterial solutions make happen to support the circular economy, what is an absolute need.
You said you worked for quite some time in the field of packaging for pet food. In our last episodes, we mostly talked about packaging for groceries. What is different when we talk about pet food? Are there other challenges than with food for humans?
Yeah, pet food is a very specific market and packaging area. We have high customer demands on cost, on quality, and on sustainability. It's a high volume market with big players like Mars or Nestle, Purina on the demand side. It's very cost sensitive. And we talk about high speed and high efficiency packaging filling lines, both for dry pet food as well for wet pet food. You know, the small 85-gram cat food pouches, for example. Mm-hmm. So here, perfect performance is really key. And that is perfect performance in the filling process, performance during transport. We need perfect performance in the supermarket when it comes to shelf presentation. We need perfect performance for consumers, to mention easy carrying, easy opening, easy storing. And we need performance or perfect performance as well after disposal. And the big players I've mentioned, they have high requirements on sustainability. Sustainable pet food packaging that needs to meet the sustainability targets of the big food companies, but still needs to fulfill the requirements which I've already mentioned. Cost efficiency, high performance, and high quality. This is not an easy one.
I'd like to ask once more. I mean, we have also high qualities for groceries for humans, but is there anything specific about pet food packaging that you do not find in packaging for human food?
Besides the high volumes I've mentioned already, there is one specificity in the pet food market as well. We have a wide variation of fill weight from 100 gram to 20 kilogram. And for all the different fill weight areas, we have specific packaging solutions. And here it is very important, as shortly mentioned before, that the product is sealed entirely and closely, because the smell of pet food is very attractive to insects. So we do have a significant infestation risk if the pet food bag isn't sealed correctly and completely. And insect infestation is something you don't want to see in a warehouse, and you don't want to see in a supermarket, and you don't want to see at home. So tight seals and good packaging is very important, especially in pet food.
Yep. I think that's a very interesting point, because that is something that is not so obvious for everyone who has not a pet at home and is not faced with these big packages for pet food. Thank you for that information.
We talked about the challenges and the specialities that distinguish pet food from human foods. But let's try and bring these two together again, because for some people, pets are equal to men, or sometimes even better. What does packaging for pet food and packaging for human food have in common?
And that's an interesting one. The consumer requirements for pet food are somehow similar to food, especially even, I must say, to baby food. I want to elaborate a little bit on similarities between pet food and baby food.
Yes, please.
The first one is, I would say, the eater is not the buyer. So the individual which is consuming the food is not the one who is buying the food.
That's interesting.
Neither the pet owner is eating it, nor the baby is buying the food. So the product in both categories must attract the buyer and the eater. In pet food, it means the pet owner and the pet itself, or the parents and the baby. The second similarity I see is a high emotional bond between, again, the buyer and the eater, if you want. The emotional bond between parents and baby, or the emotional bond between pet owner and pet. And thirdly, a specific case we have as well on the nutritional requirements and food safety requirements.
Mm-hmm.
A pet food, one product must serve the pet 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. We do not have that in human food except in baby food. In human food consumption, you normally consume, let's say, a bunch of different products, all packed in different packaging. Cereals in the morning, an energy drink, a ready meal at lunch, confectionery snacks, and perhaps bread and some cold cuts in the evening. But pet food must be made and packed in a way that one product fits all, 7 days a week, all year on. And this is something, again, similar to small baby, where you have as well only one formula for a very small baby.
That's a very good comparison, because that goes back to the question of trust. So the packaging needs to be trusted by the person who buys it, because he's not consuming it himself.
Absolutely. It's trust, and it is as well food safety.
Yep.
The requirements on quality and food safety for pet food packaging are very, very high. And this includes even packaging material testing. I mean, it goes that far. If there is a new packaging, it is always tested with product stored in it for a while to check if the product which is stored in the new pack, that the cats and dogs still loving eating it.
Yep.
So this is something very special. You see, emotion and science is something which is driving pet food packaging.
Yep, I think it's a very interesting analogy.
In the packaging world, we often hear that 1/3 of the world's food remains unconsumed or even thrown away due to improper or missing packaging. So what does this mean in consequence for packaging?
This is true with the 1/3, and it is sad, I must say. If you imagine the farming land area to produce this 1/3 of food, which is wasted, is larger than the entire area of China. Can you imagine?
Oh, that's quite a lot.
It is, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, that's shocking.
Yeah. And if we look a little bit more in detail, the food waste in underdeveloped countries occurs mainly between the field or the farm and the food factory. In the developed countries, the food waste occurs after the food production in the food factory, mainly in distribution, supermarket, and household. Here, optimized packaging helps to reduce food waste, thus reduce the CO2 footprint. Figures from London even indicate that up to 45% of the food which is purchased ends up in the bin. I think that it's unbelievable, but unfortunately that's true.
It's also interesting because we always talk about CO2 footprint for packaging, but we never talk about CO2 footprint for food that is being produced. So if you think about this and that 1/3 of it is actually thrown away, I think that's a really good point from you.
That needs a closer look. If you look at the CO2 footprint of a packed food product, we need to differentiate what comes from the product and what comes from the packaging itself. And typically, 97% of the CO2 footprint comes from the product, and only 3% comes from the packaging. Let me draw up two examples. A liter milk in a liquid carton like a Tetra Pak.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the total CO2 footprint, 96% comes from the milk and 4% comes from the carton.
Mm-hmm.
Or even more extreme, look at butter in a wrapper. 99% comes from the butter and less than 1% comes from the wrapper. That means the CO2 footprint of the packed food is more than 20 times higher than the CO2 footprint on the packaging. For sure, the adequate and optimized packaging is key. There's a lot we can do.
But apart from the carbon footprint here, which was quite shocking to hear that, there's also the ethical part. If you let food go to waste in a world where people still suffer from hunger, I think that's unethical, a personal opinion.
Absolutely. I'm fully with you, Tom, there. And it should not happen. But we are living in the Western world in overconsumption, and too many people do not care about waste.
To stay on the subject of special requirements for packaging and food waste, one form of packaging has increased significantly in recent years, single-dose packaging. These are, of course, extremely practical for people living alone or supplies in the second home for commuters, but it also means a higher proportion of packaging to food, which is often frowned upon. How do you see this development, especially when we also consider food waste?
Yeah, interesting point, Tom. In many cases, we need small pack sizes suitable for the smaller households we are now seeing. Because people, for example, they live in a small apartment over the week and go back to their families over weekend. We have single household, we have elderly people with lower consumption. And this smaller pack size means, yes, we do have more packaging, but we do have as well less food waste because the food from the pack is eaten completely. Nothing is thrown away because the food is no longer good for consumption. And net, we have a strong positive impact because, as said, the environmental impact of the packaging is much, much smaller than the environmental impact of wasted food. Yeah. So what we need is the right pack size with the right packaging. For example, monomaterials which are ready for recycling. Mm-hmm. And then we need to dispose it correctly. That needs education of consumer and easy systems. And then, of course, we need to sort, to recycle, and to use recycled material. Again, adequate packaging is the key, and plastic flexible packaging with its low weight has a very big potential here. But we need to look at this holistically, product and packaging and consumer behavior and needs.
I agree.
Can you give us a general overview of how you see the future of packaging, for example, in terms of plastic and paper, compostable materials and bioplastics, or maybe even other materials that we didn't mention yet?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a very complex subject. We could talk for 2 days or 2 hours about it, but I try to summarize it in 2 minutes. There are currently 2 key areas in that field, and this is 2 overarching subjects. One is CO2 footprint reduction, and second is creating a circular economy. We need to look at the real benefits. No greenwashing, please. And let's look at a few examples now. Paper, for sure, is a good packaging material. The tree captures CO2 and paper is recyclable. But please not with 20% plastic coating. In this case, the packaging paper-based ends up in landfill or incineration. When we talk paper packaging, we should target 95% paper and then a thin coating, in best case a biodegradable coating, which delivers the barrier and the sealing requirements. Another example of future economy and ecologically viable packaging would be plastic. Thin monomaterials, in the best case with recycled content if possible. Yes, it's currently difficult for food and cosmetic application, but we are going there. And then using in the plastic drop-in biopolymers to reduce the CO2 footprint and to reduce the dependency from crude oil. When it comes to composting, I think we should have a critical view there because composting is stopping circularity. At the end, to make it simple, composting means something like wet burning because it creates CO2 and water plus a little bit of organic materials. But it has its place. It can be meaningful to use it, for example, when you have food packaging which is highly contaminated with food. Imagine a big open air event. Yes, we will have it again after the pandemic. And if on this event, yeah, absolutely. If on such an event, all the packs and cups and dishes are made from compostable materials, they can be all collected together with the food waste and go into biogas production.
But of course, you have to separate between industrial composting and home composting.
Yeah, I come to that, of course, yeah. Another example where compostable packaging makes sense from my point of view, coffee capsules, because coffee waste and the packaging around that in the same way, that makes sense. But we need as well the acceptance by the municipalities, which means we need as well new and more realistic standards to prove compostability, and the material must on top be okay for home composting. Then looking at bio-based material, here the future is what is called second and third generation bio-based material. So no competition to food, bio-based material using waste or byproduct of the agri chain. And in best case, we use it for drop-in polymers, which can be fully recycled afterwards. Many options out there. We need to choose the right ones as usual. And we need to have a holistic view with a strong focus on the CO2 footprint and on creating a circular economy. And as said at the beginning, no greenwashing, please.
We've reached the end of the episode. Is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, the packaging value chain has always proven that it is very dynamic and agile. Now we need this dynamic and agility to create a sustainable future for the packaging.
I think I can completely align with that. Yep. So this concludes another episode of our podcast Packolution. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing your experiences and vision with us. Very, very interesting, and hopefully to our listeners as well. Please stay tuned in this channel for more inspiring episodes of Packolution with experts in the packaging industry. Thank you.